extraterrestrials in a rural portion of the state of New Hampshire from September 19 to September 20, 1961. So there you go, Ken. It was widely publicized of an alien abduction in the United States. The incident came to be called the Hill Abduction and the Zeta Reticuli incident because the couple stated they had been kidnapped by aliens who claimed to be from the Zeta Reticuli system. This story was adapted in the best-selling 1966 book, The Interrupted Journey, and the 1975 television movie, The UFO Incident, in September 2016. Plans were announced to make a film based on the events with an unknown release date. Now, most of her notes and tapes and items have been placed in a permanent collection in the University of New Hampshire, which was her alma mater in July 2011. So the State Division of Historical Resources marked the site of the alleged craft first approach with a historical marker. So that's your first abductee right there. And so now put that we'll put her under abductees. Now before that, now you remember, I don't know how far you said your data that you've contributed is in the Roswell UFO Museum in Roswell.
That's
correct.
Is
that what you stated?
That's correct. Yes, I did.
Okay.
It was safer for me to make that as a contribution so that the world had access to it, because all it would have taken is a match or a bomb or what have you to wipe Ken off the map and all of the records that I had kept. So now that it's now public to the world, and I'm much safer, and so is the archive. So that was a decision that I made 2.5-3 years ago. So it's there. I just checked on it here this past year, and that people are coming in and researching that way. Yep, you bet. So
all right. Now, I know Daryl Sims would appreciate it in this segue or advertisement or infomercial that Daryl Sims has been in the business for years, so is Dr. Bruce Maccabee. And Dr. Maccabee is on our board of directors for Alien Contact Org, ACO, and helped us get this going on radio years ago right here at TJMRCT Radio that's been developed with various people coming on, but not as many as I could have. But I had a sick husband based on the fact that he was Agent Morris for the U.S. Army and also Agent CIA and working for President Reagan separate, undercover. Our men in black are just go get the facts, because Ronald Reagan had an experience and wanted to know about all this stuff too. But we've got a history to tell, and people are going to appreciate it if we will start back when the extraterrestrials, and now I got this firsthand from my husband, that they were monitoring us on this planet, and Tom and I found out they found us here. So that's where Janet and I think knowing this was the Anunnaki story, and of course that got to be very, very hot. But Ken, for you step into the limelight in 1994. Is that correct?
Well, I guess 1995 when Mr. Hoagland took me to the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. So that was my first public exposure, if you will. And I was pretty well left alone, not, taken down or what have you, by debunkers, if you want to use another term, until, let's see, in 2007 when I went back again with Hoagland to a newer, more open-minded National Press Club conference and meeting there. So
they have an open mind press club?
Well, those that were there were at least getting first-hand information instead of creating their own news, which is lots what's going on. They don't leave the office and they create their own news. So no. It's,
did it help? Did it help?
I don't have that answer. I don't know. I can only hope that people that do research will discover that, Ken went to the world, and both in 1995 and 2007 to get the word out to the world. So I've been doing my part, I guess, and so far I'm still alive, and I hope now that I've gone public and I've given things to the museums and stuff, that what good would it do to bump old Ken off and get rid of him? Because after all, there's all the information is already done. What more damage can I do to those that are trying to maintain their level of secrecy with regards to our direct contact with extraterrestrials? So we're getting there.
Well, let's go back to when ufology wasn't around. There's no such thing, and I remember the big fight because I came in on it, even though I was still rough, because when I was an investigator, we weren't allowed to talk about such things, and it was very hush-hush back in NASA days, and then the engineers and stuff, so we were called to a meeting, and we were already having our own meetings in houses and engineers and astronauts. And the 60s, when I was a teenager but had the clearance level, May 67, and they had me fill out more clearance forms through NASA, and my husband, working in Chris Kraft, hired him. But apparently the government decided I could do this public relations work back in that day because they said I would be an ambassador of goodwill. And I didn't even know what that was. And Richard Dolan doesn't like all this. You're an ambassador, and I'm an ambassador, and we both work for the government, and we both had NASA connections. So he may have to get over people calling themselves an ambassador, but I think what he means is, I heard one of his radio shows with him and Tracy the other day, and I love Richard, and I have yet to meet Tracy, but like I said, I'm a virgin. I have never been to a UFO conference. So apparently he's making money by going around to these conferences around the world and speaking, and more power to him for that. Maybe we'll get asked to do that. Foo fighters and UFOs and various aerial phenomena were reported by Allied aircraft pilots in World War II. And I know that when my husband was very American and very into the U.S. Army, and that's all he knew, he got 2-year bachelor's of science while he was in there, and he had pulled the pins out of the equipment, or rifles, or I don't know if they were AK-40s. I don't know, folks, because I didn't even ask my husband what type. I guess I did, but I've forgotten. But when the Carter administration came in, and we went over and worked with a gentleman that had this all with all the big names, and explained a lot of things to us, and the Secretary of State and Tennessee and Georgia and FBI and what was going on. But Tom told me he was had several schools. They don't do this anymore, 21 or 26 schools, something like that. But he got overqualified. But anyway, they put him out there to take the arms over to Iran. You remember I know you remember this, Ken. I'm mentioning my husband because of Reagan, okay? And I met Reagan in Houston, and I met Bush in Houston. But Tom, one pilot and Tom only, took the weapons to. There was a trade out, and I don't know all the details, but my husband told me things, and at that time, Carter was going to wait so Reagan could. My husband was a part of all that, so I've only got his story. And anyway, that's how he met Reagan. He pulled the pins out of the rifles or shotguns or AK-47s. Y'all will have to look that up. But anyway, that's how he met Reagan. Reagan, there was now I don't know this for sure. This is secondhand information from Tom. But apparently there was a trade for the hostage crisis. I think that was 16. I don't remember. The Iran hostage deal. It was on television. Right. It was one of those things that was planned and before Oklahoma in 2001. I don't know why we've forgotten about it.
We agreed to give them so many rifles, weapons, and things, but we pulled the firing pins out of them so they couldn't use them.
Yeah, except for one. He kept one. Yeah, but we shouldn't have, and the government didn't know. It was the Iran hostage crisis. That was November 4th, 79 to January 20th, 1981. But my husband was a new recruit in 1980, and he had hurt jumping out of airplanes. His shin splinted, the bones, but he was a Kentucky wind hitter. At 2,000 yards, he hit straight on the bullseye Okay, that's a long way, apparently. I don't practice that. But because of he got held back several times, they just kept leaving him in training school. They don't do that anymore. And he's probably the reason. But they got where they wouldn't give you 2 or 3 or 4 schools. When I went through the second time, I don't remember the first time. They wiped it out of my mind, my memory, other than 74. I have to admit, there's pieces that I got. It must have been really good at my job, because I kept sending back in. But between 74 and we'll say 79 to 81, that Iran hostage, that's when Reagan came in. So he and I worked the 80-93 in uniform. So do you remember what you were doing then? Because that was a very important time for Ronald Reagan, because he had seen a UFO and wanted to know the truth.
When I went active duty in the Marine Corps in 1962, and then I got out in 1966 and went to work at NASA at the Johnston Space Center. So you can see where I was at the same time. I remember. I also remember Reagan getting shot too. So I was outside at the time.
I'm scared to talk about that because Tom and I were investigating that together or separately. But I was placed. I don't want to talk about that yet because that's going to get. Oh man. I shouldn't have brought back the Iran hostage and Tom at all, should I? Because we're gonna release a whole lot of information that may or not jive with what stories are out there. I guess that's what whistleblowers do, but we're late. We're a day late and $1 short. Does it matter now? I don't know. But I need to put your timeline across this one. But we do have to go back and start at the Iran hostage crisis during my period. But let's go back to the Foo Fighters for the historical timeline for ufology and alienology, folks, because we didn't create the CIA. Now, in 43, you and I weren't, at least in this life, and folks, we can get very metaphysical on you, but I think it drives Richard Hoagland. I don't know about him. He probably does okay with it, but Richard Dolan, I think, bonkers when we go metaphysical, spiritual science on him, because he needs to be a nuts and bolt historian. From what I'm being told, that's why I've been activated, you and I, to get this story straight and to help get this. Let me tell you, folks, Richard Dolan evoked me by saying we need an investigator. Guess what I am and what I was? I'm a retired investigator and wore several hats. So he's invoked me to come help get this story straight. But anyway, the Iran hostage crisis, of course, is history, and we may be rewriting everything somewhat with what we call Mandela effect. And Ken has agreed to help me, haven't you, Ken, with the Mandela effect and what we remember.
I'm doing my best.
And okay, well, I need to bring on my good friend Bill M. Tracer, who agreed to help me tonight. He was kind enough to wait till the last hour. Is this Bill M. Tracer, my historian, my author?
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right.
Did you just tune in, or did you just get news, or what happened?
I've been listening a while, and then, like you said, in the last hour now, I called in.
Thank you.
Yes,
well, the Mandela effect, I'm running 2 timelines, Bill, but just real quick, because you're going to be part of this historical recording, go ahead and introduce yourself, and let's. I told Ken you'd come on, and I'm so glad you did, because I'm running a history timeline, but I also want to run a ufology timeline and alienology with a cosmology and a phenomenology. But you also bring in the spirituality timeline as well. So, folks, don't get lost, but we've got to separate these tracks. And it's not going to be easy. It's very complicated because you have the truth that we all think individually, then the group consensus, and then on top of that you have the Mandela effect, Nelson Mandela effect, right, of who remember. Then, they say there's 2 sides in the truth, so you have to have the point of origin, and you have to have 2 other points to just find out where you are. So this is going to get complicated, but we're going to try to keep it as basic as we can, but this will give you an idea of what we're going to be doing in the future. So, Bill, please